And what we're hoping to do this evening over the next hour or so is talk to you guys and have a candid discussion. So that means you guys getting involved as well. It's not just going to be us sitting on the panel here talking to you about trust in the media. We want you guys to be involved in that talk as well. And talking about our relationship with trust and what that means to us. Do we trust the media outlets that we engage with on a daily basis, on a regular basis? What that means, and kind of if we don't trust them, how can we learn to trust them? What things can they do differently? What things can we do differently? And how can we learn to improve that relationship? Right, so let's kick this conversation off then between us with our first subject: the camera never lies. When you take a picture of something, it should be what you take a picture of. What you see is what you get. Well, at least that's how it used to be. I mean, now with the advent of technology, as most of us have seen, in different bits of software, we can manipulate photos and images to make it look like anything we want. I could be, say someone could take a picture of me now, and then you could position me sitting on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or somewhere else. That's kind of how far technology's gone. And kind of the thing with images and photography is kind of, do we trust those images? I'm going to start now, get you guys, you've been sitting there very quietly, thank you very much, and get your opinions on the images. And I'll start with you, Adam, because you run Truthloader. It's about kind of debunking some stories that go out and on the web and the internet. Kind of, what's your take on images, and do you think, how much of a role do you think the media has to make sure that what they're showing is true in the context in which they're showing is?
We have really, really strict compliance rules that we have to stick to. The biggest problem that we face is actually verifying images that are sent to us. So recently there have been lots of protests in Venezuela, and there were a lot of photos doing the rounds on Twitter especially that said that they showed the protests in Venezuela, but they were actually coming from all over the world. It shows just, I don't know, sometimes the media is too willing to believe that what they're being shown is what it says it is, when quite often it's not, and you've got to be a bit more sceptical.
I saw you nodding as well, Angela. What are your thoughts?
I think it's really important to think about this issue of verification, because in teaching journalism we've become more and more conscious of the fact that one of the biggest differences between professional journalism and blogging is that as a professional journalist you should be taught to be sceptical and to begin to think more carefully about what you're using. I mean, I always get a bit concerned when we talk about the media, because actually there is no such thing as the media. There's lots and lots of different kinds of media, and they have different levels of care in terms of what they do. Now, generally speaking, television in this country is regulated. And there are certain things that you actually have to do. You have to be compliant. I mean, you can get caught out all the time and make mistakes. You're much less controlled in the print media. And if people are working too fast, trying too quickly, particularly online, to get somebody to click, trying to be the first person to do the thing, trying to get the audience before anybody else does, trying to be, out there, the trouble is that you can be too quick. And you can make mistakes. And I think one of the things that audiences have to learn to do is to be aware of the fact that good journalism can take longer.
News is stuff we tell each other.
Anything that is interesting or considered important to the general public.
What you read in the papers, what you see online.
I think what makes something news is its global importance and its relevance to us.
Anyone can be a journalist. If you imagine that journalism is an act rather than a trade, every time you report on something, you are a journalist.
It's always stuff that we need to know, but not necessarily want to know.
Bursting in on the home of some grieving family and demanding information.
I think celebrities and award ceremonies, I was quite surprised to see the Oscars on the news.
Half term occurs, that's not really news. It's just a thing that happens with all schools. This half term no one can go on holiday, that's newsworthy because it's new, it's unique, it's the first time that's happened.
What isn't news, for example, is stuff that isn't remotely true. There are far too many white blokes like me making all the decisions.
It's never common to just include a young person's perspective in the news. unless it's something sensational.
It's a very static, unengaging format. It hasn't changed for a long time.
You quite often see stories that are big on social media reported in the newspapers without any verification, and that can be problematic.
Okay, so this part of the discussion is about how are young people represented in the news, in the media. Are your voices being heard? Do you think it's a true portrayal of yourselves that you're seeing in the media?
I want to talk about the 15-year-old girl, Sharika, who was shot in Hackney Vic a few days ago.
Yeah.
And the media keeps putting up a picture of her from above that's a little bit provocative, whereas they're not putting up a picture of her really smiling in her school uniform. And it's being portrayed as this whole Hackney gang violence, typical like should have happened anyway thing. And no one's really feeling sorry for her. And I was reading it in the newspaper, it was about that big. So, yeah.
So you think that image doesn't show a true portrayal of who she is?
No, it's just like...
And doesn't represent her properly, then doesn't represent...
She's not seen as a child in there, she's just seen as like this sort of like Hackney gang girl, which I think is really unfair.
The vast majority of people in this country, young people in this country, are doing truly amazing things out there. They really are. I mean, you just have to look at the myriad of award ceremonies about young people being honoured for doing fantastic things that actually are journalistically really interesting because they are new and unusual. And yet, in most newsrooms, you find that those are shoved on the spike because it's, if anyone remembers what the spike was, but they're shoved on the spike simply because they're considered goody-goody two-shoes kind of stuff, and we don't want to talk about that. If the media is going to show a proper mirror to society instead of a cracked mirror, it really has to start getting its act together, and then maybe more people would start trusting the various media outlets that are out there.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Fran. I'm 25 and I'm from the UK Climate Coalition, and I just kind of wanted to tie into what you were saying. We try and do good stuff. We campaign on climate change, try to stop climate change. And it's actually really hard to get a youth voice out there. There are some sort of sympathetic journalists in mainstream outlets, but it's not automatic for them to go to young people and ask for their perspective on one of the most important issues that's affecting our generation. And we try, but it's hard. So I think there really needs to be a change in kind of culture in journalistic culture and the way it's approached. In that anything that affects a young person, and that's not just to do with schools. Or what's going on in your local community, but like big national, international, global issues, there should be a young person's voice in that, and there needs to be a culture change.
The opinion shared by a lot of people is saying that they're still getting this image of young people, as one paper put it during the riots, of feral youth running kind of around the streets, robbing people, kind of committing crimes. I mean, I'd like to put this to kind of Derren and Ruby. Derren, you're kind of starting up with London Live, and Ruby, you've got your magazine. How important is it for you guys to make sure that you represent young people in the right way?
From a London Live perspective, I guess there's a few ways. I mean, our channel is aimed at 16 to 34-year-olds, so we actually want to hear a younger generation's voice. And there's probably 3 or 4 different ways that can happen. So one way is if you, for example, you're talking about misrepresentation in Hackney of that young girl. If our channel was live, which will be as next week, you could record a vlog on your phone, send it to us, and we'll put it on the website, and each borough has got its own area where people can express their views. The very best of those will appear on screen. For example, the 25-year-old over there that's into climate change. If you don't feel like you're getting onto national broadcasters, then I'll give you the email address of the head of Collateral for News and Current Affairs. If there's a climate change story, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get on air. I've just given an open invitation. And that's not the first time I've given an invitation, and I don't always get a response. So it's a two-way street.
And I mean, Ruby, after what Derren said, you started your magazine because you didn't feel that you were being represented. Is that something that young people need to start doing in terms of taking control?
Well, I think that's what young people are doing. We are creating our own media platforms because we feel so disconnected with the mainstream media. So we are creating our own media platforms to celebrate ourselves, celebrate our talents, talk about what we're interested in, and I'm just all for young people doing that because I think the whole media and the way young people are perceived in mainstream media changing is not likely. And so therefore, if more young people are putting together their own platforms, celebrating young people, that can have a knock-on effect for other young people, and hopefully, I'm not saying we'll overturn the mainstream, I'm not saying that at all, but just the fact that there is a celebration of young people on platforms that they've created is a good thing.
This isn't like a fully formed thought really, but there's something that kind of seems to be missing for me, which is any mention of money and commercial kind of need, because a lot of, obviously, people kind of in terms of maybe 20 or 30 years ago, you make money by selling papers, and like what you were talking about, that you get your entertainment and you get your world news and you get sport and everything and all of that. And now the way that you make money is by getting people come onto your site through advertising, and so it's kind of encouraging this clickbait kind of phenomenon of making things, like this gentleman was saying, kind of seem excessively negative or exaggerating stories, everything that we've been talking about in terms of changing images and things like that. And also money as well, for me, it's kind of like you play to who's got the money, who's going to buy these things. And young people don't have loads of money to spend on buying news and doing all of this kind of stuff. So I don't really know quite what I'm trying to get at, but there seems to be something there for me that is kind of like underlying all of this, which also for me is kind of why I've got this perception of the media being quite corrupt as well, that there's this kind of whole underneath of it which is kind of motivated by financial profit rather than by newsworthy and kind of like responsible journalism as well. I
think you're right. Ultimately, I've only ever worked for a corporate journalist, corporate institution. When we first started our channel, there was sort of a quite patronising assumption that young people were only interested in minute-long videos that barely touched on the subject, and we were sort of told that we need to churn out as many of them as we can in a day just to get the numbers up and to get the clicks up and stuff like that. And we've fought a battle for the last year and a half to change our manager's point of view. And now we've proven them wrong and proven that we can put up longer videos that go into the background of the story and give more explanation about it. And actually people are interested in watching that, and ultimately that's turned our channel into a commercial success.
Picking up on that motivation point about like what motivates the media and things, and there is such a thing about like your audience trusting you, and if and I suppose I'm in a fortunate position, I work for the BBC, we don't have that sort of commercial imperative, but everything we do should be about getting our audience to trust us.
I mean, the final section that we've got is kind of about, do we need to trust the news? Let me come up then. And what are the consequences of not trusting the news? And to kind of lead us on this is Jo Glanville. She's the director of the English Pen, and she's going to come to the front and tell us a little bit why she thinks the news is important.
I think what we've heard people say tonight is that we should be sceptical about the information. We should, when anything is published, when we see anything, we shouldn't take anything for granted. We shouldn't be gullible. Whatever source that is in, we should question what we read. So that's how I approach the news, having formerly been a journalist, and I now run an organisation, a charity, whose mission is to protect the space for freedom of expression, for freedom of speech. And I spend a lot of my time defending and supporting journalists around the world, as well as in this country, who in some way might be intimidated, or their work might be censored, or they might be prosecuted for what they write. And I see the great courage that a lot of those journalists show, and the great conviction that drives the work that they do. And so it's very depressing to see those statistics and to see the very, very low regard in which journalists are held.
I think it's absolutely essential that we value journalism because we need it. Wherever we get information from, I think we tend to be unaware of the fact that there are large numbers of people who are every single day doing the job of collecting the information, putting it together and putting it out, doing what I call vanilla journalism, which is basically telling us about the things we need to know about. A lot of it isn't considered to be incredibly important, but it's important for us if we're going to live in a democracy. We actually need to know what's being done in our name.
there's shady going on in Media Village. Some stations are talking, but they aren't saying much. They tell me this and that. In truth, I don't know who to trust. Half of it's not fact, and the other half is fantasy. What you don't see is what you see. You see. I thought all blacks were gangsters. I thought all chicks were sluts. I thought all gays were camp as hell. Thought Africa was dust. I thought they needed money. I thought it was a country. Thought the Middle East was too, up until I found out who owns the local paper, who runs your favourite blog, whose magazine is this, tell me what's their politics. Do they use their publication as a propaganda platform? Do they want to force an issue or launch a campaign? At first I was confused about why much of what's on screen appears to be at odds with what's in my reality. But then it all made sense. It all comes down to pounds and pence. Even the rawest broadcasters are slaves to money spent. So who cares about our views? Who cares about the truth? Who cares about the facts, my friends? I'll happily say who. The ones with the gold make the rules. The ones with the gold tell the news. The ones without get confused for rapists, thieves and delinquent youths, terrorists and chavs and cheats and people that we cannot trust. Whoever shall defend the neats and speak on behalf of us. The others on the outside, those whose stories seldom told, from an objective perspective, those in land without the gold. Perhaps they'll buy a camera, start a channel, share a link, to detail what's on their mind and tell us what they think. A new Vice, a new Spectator, a new Pharrell's I Am Other or Young Turks, without the corporate interest or allegiance to the church. An honest, open forum for discussion of events would be a blessing and a bonus, one might just say heaven sent. So go forth and be wise, hook up to the satellite, and be careful what you do there, friends. I hear these walls have eyes.